Fellow travelers, join us on a journey into dissonance, a sense-making sojourn through humanist nightmare fuel. If you are receiving this transmission, then you too are part of the resistance.
I see you.
Hey travelers, in today's stream, access. Some of us have it, while others struggle to gain it. Meanwhile, conservatives are outraged by the idea of using critical race theory as a lens to inform historically prioritized races about the systemic racism marginalized people face, which shape our worldview. Is CRT simply a divisive measure created to topple the hierarchy of this great nation? You be the judge as we listen in.
So, it's February 2nd, 2022. Nadine, happy Black History Month. How does it feel that you're going to have an entire month where your heritage is celebrated? I don't have anything. There's no happy Indian History Month. Nobody even cares. They're like, thank you, come again. That's all that I get. That's all that I get. Or are you a doctor? Are you an engineer? Or your kids must be really stressed out because you're beating them into getting top level SAT scores or whatever other. I mean, being Indian is still phenomenally stereotyped. And the worst thing about being Indian right now is that the Indians that make it really make it quite far sometimes tend to be assholes, right? So let's take a look. Let's take a look at one Indian, and just for a moment. Okay, so let's just see what I'm gonna just try to get something. This was one guy. I don't know where to put. I don't know which one to put for you though. Like, okay, let's see what this guy has to say. This tech review.
For just $1 a month. Link below in the description. Skip it up and that up. So unfortunately, yesterday the FCC voted to repeal net neutrality. Net neutrality, for people that don't know, was the law of the land where internet providers could not discriminate.
This guy was a Trump guy, not this dude is speaking, but Ajit Pai was the Trump pick for FCC chairman, right? And he gutted a thing called net neutrality. This guy's going to explain net neutrality and like why this mattered, right? So let's just take him a little bit.
For people that don't know, it was the law of the land where internet providers could not discriminate what kind of traffic was going through their pipes. So whether you were a small business or a huge corporation, you had access,
i.e. us. Like if we were, our stuff is, can get out there just as much as some big level YouTuber or anybody else, but net neutrality changed that. So he did this in 2017. So let's see how this affected people.
to the same internet speeds. There was no discrimination there. The ISPs couldn't be gatekeepers and chose what had full access and full speed and what had slow access or no access at all. But now the rules have changed, of course, because, well, corruption. But now all of that's changed because net neutrality is out the window. Yesterday, during a 3-2 vote, 3 in favor of repealing net neutrality and 2 against repealing net neutrality, it's gone. I'm sure there's going to be court cases and a whole bunch of legal battles to try to keep net neutrality intact, but we'll have to wait and see. But current FCC chairman Ajit Pai wants you to know that he's hip and trendy, and you don't have to worry about the internet. Everything you do on the internet now is going to be a-okay. He actually posted a video over on the Daily Caller, which was co-founded by Tucker Carlson, who works for Fox News. Yeah, just let that all sink in. And he tried to be really hip and edgy in this video, making sure, don't worry, the internet's going to be just fine, even though I just sold it out to large corporations. The video is so fucking cringeworthy, I want to vomit, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. Take a look.
Oh, he non-ironically dressed like this?
Hi, I'm Ajit Pai. I'm the chairman of the FCC. Recently, there's been quite a bit of conversation about my plan to restore internet freedom. Here are just a few of the things you'll still be able to do on the internet after these Obama-era regulations are repealed. You can still gram your food. Quality. Are you selfieing or just... You can still post photos of cute animals, like puppies. You can still shop for all your Christmas presents online. Yes, got that bulk deal on fidget spinners. Yes, those Eclipse glasses are so cheap.
What is happening right now?
You can still binge watch your favorite shows. You can still stay part
I
of
thought
your
that
favorite fan
dragon
community.
was gonna rip his head off.
What?
That would have been fantastic. So here's the problem. Here's the problem with this, right? Everything he's listing is the idea that you can still be a rampant consumer. You can still consume everything, right? The
Well-
problem is the people who have the ability to consume at high levels also have the privilege of being affiliated with internet service providers that are higher level because they cost more. And the people who can not afford that and have low cost options are still gonna get, they're still gonna be biased against, right? They're still gonna be biased against them, or there's gonna be selectivity away from them and towards people who have greater or more affluent, kind of connection to the internet. And this guy was like totally okay with that, whereas everything from the Clinton administration through the Obama administration, a lot of messed up stuff with those two dudes. However, there was this other stuff like bridge the digital divide. So individuals who don't have access to all sorts of stuff in the way like some people just think, well, that's just normal. And it's like, well, it's not normal. Like there are people who have to choose between the electricity bill and the groceries, and so like internet isn't just some, let's just do that. Oh, this isn't good enough. Let's make it a higher speed, higher quality, higher whatever. Let's just bump it up to ultra maximum. Except people can't afford $200 a month to do that kind of thing, right? Or $250 a month or whatever the case is. And yet, for those people who can't afford that, their kids still go to school because we still have public schooling, and their kids go to school and their kids are increasingly required to do work online, and a computer is not optional at this point, and an internet connection is not optional. So you see how incredibly, and now we're going to go into it, folks, right? This is the beginning of Black History Month, and we're going into today's discussion, which will be the first of a few parts. And we're going to do some different content on this because we want to take deeper dives into the idea of all the conflict around critical race theory. But folks, this is part of critical race theory. Like this decision making by this FCC chairman is ignoring all the systemic inequalities that exist as to why it's not okay. It's not about being able to shop on Amazon or binge Game of Thrones. It's about being able to have the internet as a basic function of life, which it has now become for people. Like you can't really exist unless you're in like Papua New Guinea, like without the internet at this point in terms of it touching your life. So before I comment more on this guy and kind of talk about my own issues with this, what are you thinking in terms of this concept, right? In terms of like net neutrality and its effects, like how is that something that, I mean, it probably slipped by, right? It wasn't like you were like gathering with everyone. It slipped by a lot of people. People weren't really talking about it as much unless you were really into this concept. But now the concept is you got more money, just like everything. You got more money, you get more privilege. So you got more money, you get faster internet, you get better internet. You got less money, tough shit.
Yeah, that definitely affects me because I'm over here thinking like, oh my gosh, so that's what's going on when I'm like calling the tech to like come out here and like, can you look at this? And they're like, oh well, there was a splicer on your thing to like, we like removed that, but like, and like, okay, it got a little bit better, but like now, no, I didn't know anything about this. Like it completely passed me, except for I'm living the experience of like, dang. And you know what? It was worse though. My internet was so much worse when I was over in Lynn Oaks. Like it was horrible. Like, it really was. So
I wonder why.
yeah.
Why wouldn't that be? Why wouldn't that be? So folks, Linton Oaks is a neighborhood here in Gainesville, Florida, that is quite literally
Outside
across the way in terms of a particular kind of divide, and there it's the one amazing thing that I remarked about when you lived in Linton Oaks was the idea that for the people who have the least mobility just economically, in terms of not having access to cars, in terms of taking their kids to school, in terms of picking their kids up from school, in terms of going to a grocery store that's very far away. Linton Oaks was placed at a place where there was literally no access. There was no easy way to come and go from that particular place. I mean, there was the regional transit system, the bus system that we have, but the problem with that bus system is that it didn't run in a greater frequency to serve the underserved needs of people at Linton Oaks. It just ran like normal, and running like normal is not a very efficient way to go if you're traveling long distances from Linton Oaks to anywhere else in the greater Gainesville community. And anywhere else specifically has to do with access. It has to do with things like food security. It has to do with things like, just being able to even make quick decisions. Like everything isn't, like I must plan things out exactly with bus schedules and whether or not everyone is going to be okay to do this, instead of just, I think I need some shampoo, and then you're going to go do that. Oh, we're running out of toothpaste. There is no thing like that. And we'll go into a little bit more. There's so much to unpack, folks, so much to unpack. But
oh my gosh.
Tell me about the store.
The store?
Yeah, the Linton Oaks store.
The Linton Oaks store.
Like, you call it the store, you call it the corner store, right? That's a very folksy, and it makes it seem very like going to the corner store. Let's be very honest and say exactly what the store is.
The store is like a super overpriced, like there's like a liquor store, and then there's like snacks, candy, sodas. You maybe can find a few like meat items that are like, you're gonna pay so much for these items because they're here, because they're like right there. Like maybe there was like
New York strip steak.
No, definitely not New York strip steak.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So that's all right. You got a little someone requiring a little bit of attention there. So as Nadine tends to her studio audience there, we are going to clarify some things about this store. So folks, this store was a rundown, beat down, beat up, like, it's a gas station store. That's it. it's a place that maybe other people who are listening to this, maybe you run in there because you're feeling thirsty and you want something, or you need a little snack. You know, when Nadine is talking about meat items, think about the beef jerky that's usually there or whatever, next to the pork rinds, next to, you know, this isn't even about like, you know, our peeps up in New York, for example. It's not a corner bodega, right? Like Nadine, when she comes back on, it will show like it's previously, when it's corner bodega, she used to previously live up in Philly. Corner bodegas, you can do okay. You can do okay with those, right? Like there's a good amount of sustenance in there. Like when I was in college up in Boston, when I lived up in New York, you know, I didn't go to grocery stores that often, right? There were bodegas and there were delis that had lovely food, right? Like I wouldn't say go ahead and survive off of that, but many people would be thankful to survive off of that. I did okay when I was, you know, younger because my body and my stomach were made out of like, you know, very much more sturdy materials as opposed to right now. Now, like everything that enters my body has to be a little bit, you know, there's a line of acceptability that has to be met, just so that I don't get like stomach aches and whatever else the case is. But when you think about nutritional value and you think about the value of like even perception, like what is perceived to be food, like folks, there's not even a McDonald's if you think that that's what folks out of Linton Oaks will go and like get and have and whatnot. It's not even that. It's not like, oh, eating, like, why don't you use your government subsidies, use your food stamps for, plan it out, Nadine, plan it out and have healthy food for your children. Yes, please.
First and foremost, I did plan, and I do plan. Like I would walk sometimes because Saturday was the day that I could go, and I was pregnant. So I would walk I think it was 2.7 miles and fill up a stroller while my kids are in daycare and like push that thing back and, you know, to get food for the entire month. So I didn't have to go back every week and do that again and again and again. And that's the thing, like that's why, you know, it can be difficult to like learn how to, you know, when you're not living in that type of, you know, crisis, when things are a little bit more accessible, because now I live in a little bit closer, even though it's still far from here, but like it's a little bit more accessible. Like at least I'm not all the way over the bridge, like they call it, you know. There was like nothing. But I did plan it out, and I would go literally the extra mile and shop, you know, like in bulk to make sure that the entire month was covered.
Now, all of that reality,
Mm-hmm.
that only happened to you because you're an irresponsible single Black woman, right? And a mother, and you're not taking care of things, and you're not kind of like using what's being provided for you in the best way. It's really, all of that happened because you're what? Lazy, irresponsible, uneducated. What are the things that we should accept? What are the premises we should accept at this point? Did they happen because of that? Was it only you? Were there other super responsible, awesome people who were like, who live out in Linton Oaks, who were like, our lives are fine, I don't know what you're complaining about?
I feel like there's people like that everywhere.
Well, there's certainly people like that everywhere, but my point is,
no, I was definitely
like,
not the only person like in that position, not by far, you know.
And let's be honest about that on all sides, right? The idea that if you have problems based on your background, based on the skin suit you walk around in, based on all of those things, there's a how are you fucking things up for yourself and how can you do better concept. But when other people that live in other places, issues occur in their lives, such as taxation issues or something that like gas prices are going up, that is a worldwide conspiracy, right? The fact that like no one says to people when gas prices are going up, well, why don't you make more money and go like pay for that gas? Why don't you work harder? Like that's not necessarily said, right? It's considered as a systemic issue. Like, well, gas prices are going up. It's not our problem. Like, I'm making good money. I'm living my life. This is this issue, you know, like that's a problem. And that's because of some trade agreement over here that isn't working out and stuff like that. But the funny thing is there are, and it's not funny at all, it's horrible. There are people who live in Linton Oaks who can't say that. They can't say, well, our problems are because of systemic issues that have existed for hundreds of years. And nothing's been done about those. And we're here, we're living in cycles of poverty, houselessness, food insecurity, lack of education, lack of health. If kids don't get good food and have crap, high carb loaded foods that go shoot up and shoot back down, and then those kids are acting some kind of way and are feeling some kind of way in class, and then they get into more and more trouble, and DeAndre, there's no hope for you. Well, maybe there's hope for DeAndre if he could just like not have Hot Pockets for dinner, but like have a meal that's prepared that isn't that complex. I mean, even rice and beans and a little bit of chicken might go well, but rice and beans and chicken is not an easily got commodity. And I'm not saying even in terms of affordability, I'm just saying in terms of where do you get it, because it ain't at the store.
Right.
These are systemic
and people
issues.
don't understand, you know, like especially if you're on the bus. Listen, it's like, well, why can't you just stop off at a store that has it first? Well, because if I don't jump on this bus, go collect my children, quickly sign them out, run across the street with them safely, catch the bus to go back, get on another bus, catch that bus to catch another bus before that route ends, that drops me off over in like, makes it seem like over in godforsaken land, like over the bridge, then me and my children will have to walk across a basically busy, you know, bridge highway, like, and we've had to do that. I've had to push a stroller across that because we missed the bus. So that's why it's a choice of that, like, do I want to endanger their lives or feed them?
Right. It's
sometimes it's like it seems like, why is that so? But no, I mean, we might have to eat cereal that night, like, you know. It seems like unbelievable unless you've really been through it. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like that shouldn't be a thing. Yeah, I agree, it shouldn't be a thing.
And you know what, everybody, there's so many points of intersection with this, right? There's yes, the fact that we're here in North Florida, and that North Florida is essentially the South, and this is what happens in the South. It may not be the same, you know, Nadia, I was talking before that, you know, even, you know, the corner store down here is this like beat down kind of weird place, whereas up in Philly, where you used to live, up in New York, Boston, bodegas, give me a bodega. I won't go to
Mhm.
Publix, which is our grocery store here, or one of the few that different ones that we have, the chains that we have. I won't go there. I'll just go to the bodega.
Yeah.
Pretty much has
Yeah.
everything we need. Here you have to go to, like, you know, when you go for like, oh, an amazing salad bar, or like that open meal, you know, kind of like, you know, take the fresh food and put it
Yeah.
in a container and come away with it. Here it's like, oh, you have to go to Whole Foods or Fresh Market.
Yeah.
Up north, every bodega had fresh food. It was fresh food.
Yeah.
And it was a
Yeah.
corner store.
Yeah, that's where the corner store, the idea comes from. For me, the corner store had some of your basic necessities. You could get rice, you could get beans, you could get milk, you could get eggs, you could get groceries. And you could get some candy or soda if you wanted that too, but like you could get groceries and feed your family.
If you're fortunate enough to be in a place where there's greater diversity as well,
that's true.
You know, there can be a Korean food market, a Chinese food market. There's even in this city, there's Indian bazaars. There's some markets that are halal, you know, for Muslim populations. But you know, just because it says halal, go in there. There's awesome food in there that you can buy, and it's not like you're not allowed to buy that food. All that is there, and yet even those places may not. I mean, there's just some places like Linton Oaks that are just out there, and so, you know, we're putting people out there. Stop complaining. You have heat and water and a roof over your head, don't you? You know, it's like, yeah, but how about food and access to school and access to, like, what happens if your kid has 104.3 degree fever? What happens there? Like, no one's going to call the ambulance, because that ambulance is going to, there's some way that cost is going to come back around to you. You can't hop in your car because you don't have a car. The bus isn't running in the middle of the night. And even if it was, how far away is the closest even dock in a box? Like, you know, one of those, like, you know, like care spaces, much less actual hospital.
It's far from here. It's far from here. And I would basically go into debt, because if my kid has a fever, I'm gonna call and like rack up that debt, you know, like, but like, that's the sad truth, is like, yes, we are racking up debt, but.
Okay. So we got to talk about stuff like this, folks, because this is really what the idea of, okay, first of all, no one aside from people, and it's not just what you may have heard about critical race theory, it's not just in law school spaces. Critical race theory exists across multiple social science spaces. It exists in spaces, two of the spaces I occupied, in education and in communications, right? It exists in in the space that I worked for many years and continue to work, which is in healthcare. Then we also have the justice space, right? So the idea is that you're not being taught critical race theory unless you are actually learning the theoretical constructs and where they came from and the history of those kinds of constructs. And one of those spaces that might be great to learn from is this particular, oh my God. But this, by Richard Delgado, is a seminal book, right, on critical race theory. And there's a lot of different, you know, like let's take a listen to what Delgado writes, just even in the introduction, right? Think of events that can occur on an ordinary day. A child raises her hand repeatedly in a 4th grade class. The teacher either recognizes her or does not. A shopper hands a cashier a $5 bill to pay for a small item. The clerk either smiles, makes small talk, and deposits change in the shopper's hand, or does not. A woman goes to a new car lot ready to buy. Salespeople stand about talking to each other, or all converge trying to help her. In those spaces, when you were raising your hand when you were younger, did the teacher recognize you or not?
Ooh.
Yeah, just quick shot. Like, how much were you recognized? How much did you feel acknowledged?
I was acknowledged, but it was a negative, like it was
Okay, so
I was chided. That was a whole other
that's
abuse.
showing something. You go to a store and you're buying stuff or you're seeking to buy stuff. Are people crowding around to help you, or
eyeballing me from like every corner? Like watching my every move, more like.
Right.
Yeah.
If you are a person of color and these same things happen to you and the actors are all white, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? You immediately think that you might be treated in these ways because you're not white. I mean, these are the complexities of thinking that start to open up, and we have to take these understandings from this very like everyday experience space, right? Because the idea is that it's not just this one car salesman over here, racist, not racist. That's not the thing. I mean, like, I understand that if we just go around, you know, and just look at everyone of fair complexion and say you're racist, it's not necessarily, you know, I'm not even going to talk about whether it's solving something or not, or this or that. It's not getting to the root of the real problem that exists in that space. Now, like, one thing, you know, we've had a colleague say this, right? And I wish this was like a live stream so that we could just see like what people would think about this. But
yeah,
the colleague who said, who is African American, and she said, Black people can't be racist. So what do you think about that? How does that, like, first, did she mean Black people can't be racist against other Black people, or they can't be racist in any space?
I think it was more of a general thing. Yeah, she just said like there was no distinction made, so I just took it as like that. I'm like, because I even said like, what do you mean? Like,
well, you know, in one sense, racism, just like sexism or anything else, like in those ism spaces, there is a power dynamic at play. So when you are racist or you're sexist or you are oppressing or you're harassing, you're usually in the position of power, right? And so in that case, there may be, you know, like there may be different ways to look at that kind of concept, you know, and there may be different reasons why you get there. Like back in the, when was it, 80s, late 80s, early 90s, back when Bill Cosby, who is a monster of a human being, but back when, folks, you know Bill Cosby to either you don't know who Bill Cosby is, or you know Bill Cosby to be one of the members of the broad range of men that were brought down by the Me Too movement relative to the horrible stuff that they did. Bill Cosby allegedly, I believe he's been convicted of this, but I'm just going to say allegedly because people always say allegedly because they don't want to get in trouble for accusing someone of something. But the dude did some horrible things relative to women in terms of, let's just say, forcing women to engage in spaces that they would not want to engage them if they were conscious. Does that kind of cover the gamut of what he may have done?
Yes.
Yeah, like women may not want to do that if they're conscious, right? Like, so, yeah. So Bill Cosby was an asshole before that too, because at one point he said that the whole problem with especially Black youth, but was focusing on Black male youth, was, well, you gotta see all these people and they're just putting on, they're wearing their pants down below their bottom. below their bottoms, and they got these hoods on, and they're walking around like some kind of roughnecks. And his like little cute little voice that he probably used when he wasn't raping people, but he basically like looked at the most superficial level of things relative to Black people in terms of how they may have lived, and he might as well have said the same thing that, you know, Ronald and Nancy Reagan said. Like, look at these welfare queens, you know, and they're just abusing the system, and they're using the system, and they're doing this and they're doing. Folks, there's so much complexity here. We need lenses, not ideas like critical race theory, believe this, believe all white people are racist. It's not that. It's the idea of taking a theoretical framework and applying it as a lens through which we look at things, so that we can look at something like this. Like, this guy is an Indian guy, and he's a brown guy like me, right? But if you think he can't be racist and can't operate in a marginalizing, oppressing way, then you haven't followed the whole idea of net neutrality and him taking apart net neutrality. The reason net neutrality was taken apart was to take back the access and voice that was given to people of color and minority populations and socioeconomically oppressed populations through the Obama administration. And it was essentially, one can translate that in a way of like, whoa, whoa, whoa now, giving Black people too much voice.
Woo!
Right? And so
Yeah.
that guy can be racist.
Yeah.
Because his race is different than the race of the people that he is opening up the broad range of opportunity for oppression. Right? So he can be racist, but he's a person of color. Can persons of color be racist against other persons?
Yeah,
of
well,
color?
it's I just want to say, like, it's crazy, because that's where my biggest that's where I've experienced the most damaging oppression, like as far as it kind of prepared me to just like, for a greater part of my like adult life, just kind of like surrender to like how things are supposed to be, rather than really, you know, addressing like, you know, what was in my head and what was in my heart, and like what like real things, real questions that I had. And yeah, that came much closer, like, than I won't say that you know, no, like, I didn't feel any, or I wasn't affected by any, you know, any racism from like other, you know, people outside of my own race, definitely, but the most of it came from like in my own race. So that's why when that was said, it was just like, yeah. I had a completely different reaction, because it was just like, that's not been my experience at all.
And that's an important point to make, that many people may come up, not necessarily, you know, people of color may come up not necessarily feeling like, oh, this racist white person racisted me, you know, like just was racist towards me, racist dragged me, you know, like, well, whatever the case is, it may not necessarily be that overt. Much of it may be the hidden encoding that goes into just how it is you're supposed to live. Like when Black mothers of Black sons, of which you are one, have to tell their sons how to behave in multiple spaces, but especially in spaces where there is authority present, and especially if it's law enforcement, because if you behave in any other way, you will be at high risk of harm or death.
Yeah.
How many people are talking about that? I mean, there's plenty of affluent people and rich white people who may say to their kids, you know, don't go into that neighborhood. There's blacks there, you know, or whatever the case is, or there's Mexicans there, or whatever is there, like that's the bad place. So they may say things like that, but those things aren't real. Those things aren't actually happening. Whereas the death of multiple black sons is happening all the time. And we have to be able to look at that, but we have to acknowledge where those coded messages come from. And they come from racism, but that they may not be there. You may not be telling that to your son because of an awareness of racist action that's been taken against you now. That idea may be coming from 150 years ago. And something horrible happened then, such as happened a few miles away from here, where human beings were just hung from trees. You know how you hear about that, folks? The lynchings, the lynchings, and that stuff happened just a few miles from here, right? And happen in many other places that are probably likely a few miles from wherever you might be as well. May still be happening. I don't know. But the idea that we're trying to get to here is that there is racism has an effect that is generational. It's not just, it's not enough for a white person to say, I'm not racist. I'm your ally. I mean, or even I accept my racism, but I'm not really, I'm a good one. I'm a good one because I'm your ally. Like, that's not enough. Great. Allyship is great. Acknowledging one's latent racism is great. There's a lot of racism that I've had to acknowledge in multiple different ways. But it's how it affected me, because see this guy over here, this brown guy. I mean, he's the same color. I'm the same color as a couple of your kids, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and they're black kids, and can't I just be part of it too? But that's not true, because Indian immigrants who came here to this country, and he's of my generation, right? And he climbed on up, but he didn't pull it up by his bootstraps. Like, Indian immigrants who came to America, think of that. Like, if you want to go to Spain with your kids, and just go build a life there, can you make that decision this year and go do that?
No.
You moving to Spain this year?
No.
Right. So when Indian people came from India to the States and set up shop in places like New York and Philly and Boston and Detroit and wherever else, they were able to do that because they were bringing lots of privilege with them. All right. Like, my parents who did that, physician, ex-naval, officer, my dad, my mom was a physician, my dad's ex-naval officer, who then, a veteran, right? Veteran. And also a person who had business degrees falling out of his ears, right? So all of that, this guy's, family may or may not have had that privilege, but you don't become an FCC chairman by eating the stale hot dogs at the corner store, right? That doesn't happen.
Right.
And we have to just be fucking honest about that. And the situation with this guy and with me is that many Indians, because they were marked as people of color, so they basically had to move into neighborhoods where people of color lived, especially in cities where there were black people and there were other Eastern Asian people and Western Asian people, and there were Haitians, and there were, there were different Latinx, communities of people that lived there. And, it was the great melting pot, except it was a great melting pot that white people said, you are over there. And that happened in New York, it happened in Philly, it happened in different places. And
Yeah.
yet some of those immigrants were like, well, and I've heard this said, like, I've heard this said in my family, like, thankfully not, like more recently, but like some decades ago, like, oh, we don't do that. The blacks do that. The blacks, right? Like, that's how I heard it. The blacks do that. And I'm like, but the blacks are the family members of my friend Jerome from school. Like, what? And like, here's the thing, like, Jerome's lighter skinned than I am. So what criteria are you using?
Yeah.
Like, what's the, like, is it the color of the skin? Because there's plenty, it's not necessarily racism, but in India, there's plenty of classism, right? There are family members that I have that have the same skin color that you do, right? On my mom's side of the South Indian, which is much darker and whatever. And then there's guys like me and guys like him. And there's prejudice down to those people, right? So it's like a color gradient chart, right? And that happens in places like Jamaica, that happens in places, in the Middle East, it happens in
right here.
It happens right here, right? So I don't know, Nadine, let's take stock for a moment and just think, like, what do you think? Are we slowly unpeeling the complexity of this as to why critical race theory may be an important thing to consider?
Yeah, I think definitely we are slowly but surely, like, unwinding. Like, there's so many, it goes pretty deep. I've had to even have like a conversation with my son, about, colorism, and just, if he notices, or, just like keeping his eyes open, and him being aware of, even because he was like, Mom, it doesn't make any difference to me. I don't feel like it gives me any type of privilege, or like, I don't feel like there's any benefit to, my skin color or whatever. And I was like, I'm glad that you are thinking in that way, but like, do you notice other people's reaction? And he was like, or do you notice any difference in other people? And he was just like, not really, but, I just like said to him, like, well, just keep your eyes open then, and like, if you notice something like that, like, I'm here to talk to you about it, because like, and I made sure to tell him, like, it's not, a thing that's like, oh, it's bad, like, it's really bad, like, you can't control other people's reaction, but I do want you to be aware of how things are. Right. I want you to be aware of how things are.
Yeah. And that's another thing, if he has not experienced it, or if someone has not experienced something, doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? That's why what we're trying to do is, if there is a lens of critical race theory that's taken into, like, your son is in 5th grade, my son's in 6th grade, and your daughters are younger and in elementary school. So in those spaces, to approach those types of ideas, that there is a reality, not to encode in those children's minds that everything's all good, everything's equal where they exist, because it isn't. And setting those children up in that way is not necessarily, bringing us towards a post-racial society. It's not doing that.
Right.
Right. It is just, it's telling those children lies, And when they move out into the world, like your son is mixed, you know, and to say it in the simplest way without all, again, folks, you can't just say half black, half white. There's all sorts of nuance in terms of what is in your family background and what's in his father's family's background. But let's just say he's mixed and he's half black, half white. And folks, the truth of that is he's black. That's the social truth. And the truth of me, like, it'd be different if I had hair on my head right now, but I don't. That hair fucked off several years ago. So if I had hair on my head, maybe that'd be a little bit different. And there's times where, like, even like this guy at this Ajit Pai, the way he talks, and at some drunken frat party or some like tech bro thing that he went to, he can probably pass as white, you know, or like be accepted in that space. But then again, not really. And who knows what his life has been. But me, the way that I exist and the way that I like being down here, I mean, one of my earliest memories down in North Florida was working with a family. You've heard this story. And, you know, it was a family, I won't say much about it, but I was doing field work, and it was relative to, you know, social services, you know, relative to education. And there was some stuff that was done. And the patriarch of a family of a couple of brothers that I'd worked with, you know, saw that there was great benefit to the types of interventions. And I hate to say it, people, but these were government interventions. Government interventions, get the government out of my kids' heads. But this representative of federally funded like work went and helped these kids who were white kids who have been in a tradition of living in a particular type of agricultural, like, you know, family community, but not super high socioeconomic status and not super high education level. And they got through some difficulties educationally that they were having in terms of learning. And the patriarch of that family, is an older guy, was pretty, I think, moved by that. And I knew it took him a lot to approach me, because he had previously not approached me and not wanted to deal with me. And with his calloused farming hands and my like dainty, delicate, I'm an academic, right? Like, we shook hands, and he said to me with absolute genuine emotion, "You're all right for a colored fellow." And that's a horrible thing to say and to hear, but I was, by that point, like halfway through a master's degree in social sciences, and had gone through my undergraduate degree in you know, philosophy and literature and comparative belief systems and stuff like that. So I knew enough to know that this guy was speaking to me. I mean, there's easily people could just be like, "Bitch, that's racist," and just punch him in the head. Or there are people who could, you know, hold all sorts of grudges. Or they're more likely the people who are like, "Well, actually, Mr. Bryson, that is an inappropriate way to speak to someone, a person of color like myself." And it wasn't a teachable moment. This guy was coming through a lot of encoding, and something had opened up, and what I think he had seen was this guy that wasn't just a colored fella, but it was a Yankee from up north. And I still sounded like this, but probably sounded more like it then. And so he just had a lot of distrust, but he saw like, oh, but this guy genuinely cares for my kids, right? And these kids, man, it was hard, because they used to come and be like, "Mr. Syed, here's this over here. Take a look at what we did this weekend. Me and my daddy and my uncle, we went out and we got a 3-pointer. And I was like, okay. And I looked at the pictures, and the 3-point was a severed deer head with like antlers and 3 points on it. And they were like, you know, hey, next week when you come back, you want some of the meat? And I'm like, yeah, you know, like I don't know, so like I tried and failed to cook deer meat, and this was like, you know, 20 years ago. But like it's a different culture, and critical race theory isn't just about, like, yes, there's a lot of accountability placed on white Americans, right? And so should there be historically. I mean, we've had, you know, enslaved Chinese immigrants to build railroads. The granddaddy of enslaving Black, not even immigrants, but like forced labor, kidnapped people brought over on ships. And if they were sick, they were dumped overboard, like to essentially build the wealth of this country.
This great nation.
There were Japanese citizens around World War II who were put in cages, internment camps, that were the same thing that was done to Jews in Nazi Germany, and in and around that space. That, like, internment camps, lots of different types of ongoing prejudice against different minority groups, as we're talking about, you know, well, like even our most recent president before before Joe Biden, who was like, you know, those Mexicans, and they're just, you know, they're rapists and murderers. I mean, all of that has happened here. That entire history of shit. Folks, they put, you know how Japanese people now, maybe in most people's minds, mean like PlayStation and anime and stuff like that. Previously, Japanese people were also put into cages in the United States. That was only a few decades ago, right? We did all that. And we have to understand that in order to understand why there's such divisiveness as it exists here in this country. But let's hear a little bit from the other side of things. What do you say, Nadine?
All right, come on. Let's.
This is PragerU. Have you heard of PragerU?
No, I have not.
Okay. The U is supposed to stand for university, and Prager is the name of the person who started this whole thing, this very successful online platform, right? 2.94 million subscribers, right?
Okay.
And Dennis Prager is the guy, super conservative, lots of conservative money going into it. Other people have described this way better. But this guy has on a lot of different people. We're about to hear from James Lindsay, who is a super high-strung person who talks a whole lot to convince you that, like, racism doesn't exist and things like that. So we're going to just hear a little bit of what
This should be interesting.
About critical race theory.
Okay.
Have you heard about critical race theory? I'm guessing you probably have. It has already insinuated itself into many institutions and is making rapid progress into others. If it takes hold, it will completely change the very nature of America and the way you live. Critical
oh my
race.
God, isn't it like the upside down
The
flag?
upside
I mean,
down
everything's
flag.
gone to shit. All those colored people, they took over and they turned all the flags upside down.
Oh my God.
It's horrifying, isn't it? All right. Anyway, sorry.
Race theory holds that the most important thing about you is your race, the color of your skin.
It doesn't say that at all. It doesn't say that the most important thing about you is your race or the color of your skin. What it says...
It's funny that they said that, though.
Yeah, what it says is there are incredibly complex mechanisms that have been built up over hundreds, if not decades of years, you know, and those those very complex systems have placed undue preference on certain races and skin colors and undue bias on certain races and skin colors. So it's that system that exists everywhere, demonstrably, that has created the need to understand that skin color and race are important considerations because they do affect people in really difficult ways.
Yes.
But let's see if he can go ahead and disprove that.
And that's who you are. Not your behavior, not your values, not your environment, your race.
Come
In
on.
critical race theory, if you are a member of a minoritized racial group, their term, not mine, you are a victim of a system that is rigged against you, a system that doesn't want you to succeed. On the other hand, if your race is privileged, you're an exploiter, whether you intend to be or not. Critical race theory begins from the assumption that racism occurs in all interactions. To see how this works, consider this thought experiment. Imagine you own a shop and two customers enter at the same time, one white and one black. Who do you help first? If you help the black person first, critical race theory would say you did so because you don't trust black people to be left alone in your store. That's racist. If you help the white person first instead, critical race theory would say you did so because you think blacks are second-class citizens. That's racist too. That
Or any number of things,
Right.
right? It could be that don't let the black person wander around the store. That's real.
Mm-hmm.
Help the white person because you're more comfortable with the white person. That's real. You could be a black store owner and still look at a black person walking the store and be like, what's this person doing over here? And be prejudiced against that person. Or a black store owner looking at a white person, oh, hello, Mr. Johnson, let me come in, and it'll be that. Or you could be a white store owner who genuinely looks at a black customer and says, oh, hey, Miss Linda, like how have you been? I haven't seen you around in here. How's everything? Oh, you've been down a little bit oh no, you had COVID? Oh, that's so bad. I'm so sorry. And that may occur too.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things occur.
Yeah.
And yes, racism is intertwined into all of it. Like, it's not so black and white. I don't even know why that, like, this. We have to look that up. Why does that exist? Does that exist because those are two different, like, no. Is that like black and white in terms of race, or is it black and white in terms of like yin yang, right? Like the two different energies and two different, like the white space and the black space. It's too racist. It's not black and white. It's not so clean cut. It's not so like up. So he's going real simple with this, and it doesn't exist in that way. And having an awareness of how those interactions take place isn't a bad thing. Having an awareness of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, if you're walking around somewhere and you see a couple of black dudes on the corner just standing and looking at each other and talking to each other and just existing, and if you stiffen up around that, there's a lot of different reasons you might stiffen up around that. And you have to examine that, right? And you have to examine that and then decide to come to a place where you can, like me, growing up in a particular space that I did, and growing up in a way where my prejudice was my prejudice stemmed from the fact that I wasn't accepted anywhere, white or black, right? And so when I was walking up to a group of dudes and they may have looked at me in a particular kind of way, that group of dudes could have been white or could have been black, and they would have had reactions or, you know, taken a particular type of or moved in a particular type of way as I was walking through, but my coding, my racist coding, made me lock into a defensive posture relative to all of that. And I had to come to a place as an adult where I just walked by whoever it was and I just did the thing that I now do regularly, just like, as you say, look a human being in the eye and say, how you doing? Yeah. Hey, how you doing, man? And just, oh, hey, what's up? Immediately, it just locks out, because those guys may have a particular type of perception on me based on how I'm dressed, the way I'm walking, whatever the case, whatever it is, yeah. Right? Everyone needs it. Not just what these guys are saying is this is all there to marginalize white people, but it isn't. It's there for all of us. Critical race theory considerations.
That's critical race theory. It can find racism in anything, even if it has to read your mind to do it. Critical race theory is a uniquely American invention. Brewed up at Harvard Law School in the 70s.
Brewed up? Do you know how theoretical constructs come to be? There is a lot of evidence, like evidence building and data mining that goes, you can't just say, this is how people behave. You have to have evidence, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. You don't just brew it up, or you don't just say, this is how it looks like to me around my neighborhood or around my workplace or around my town. Therefore, it's that. You can say, this is how it is in my town, and you can be descriptive about it, but you can't say that's how it is in every town.
Right.
Right? So you don't just brew shit like that. Oh, yeah. They don't even care about Harvard Law anymore. I thought Harvard Law, like this guy probably graduated from Harvard Law, and it's like, now you're like throwing shade at Harvard? Like, what's going on, folks?
Now part of the academic and media mainstream, it is also uniquely un-American because it rejects the core tenets of the American, classically liberal Judeo-Christian value system. It turns the bedrock American...
By the way, that means Christian.
Wait, huh?
That means what? Christian. The core tenets of the American classically liberal Judeo-Christian value system just means Christian. And what he says, even though our forefathers in this country, the founding fathers...
So it's because it rejects like, Christianity? Is Christianity say something about like...
Yeah, because Jesus was like, I'll take everybody. Except what you didn't have were when Jesus walked around, everybody looked exactly like me, including him. There really weren't that many black people. There weren't Asian people wandering around there. There might have been a few traders and this and that, but you didn't, you know, there wasn't all this like, I'm for everyone. Like, you know, you can't take the scene from Jesus Christ Superstar, a hippie musical from the 70s, and think that's how all of Jesus, because they had like all sorts of people of different races and diversities and ethnicities, like all present with Jesus. And he's like, these are my children. And it's like, that's not how it happened. So it wasn't classically liberal. He was saying in the sense that Jesus is liberally minded, you know,
yes,
like, okay. So we're liberally minded. It's such an untruth, but
yeah,
you know, we'll go with it.
It turns the bedrock American idea upside down. Here it is.
Upside down shit.
Bro, what
does that mean?
What is they on? They flipping us on our heads. Like what?
Is he maybe thinking about like an upside down cross? Like that's the demon's like symbol. Yeah.
In the words of Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanchik, two leading proponents.
Now he's shitting on Richard Delgado. That's the thing that we were just looking at.
Critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and the neutral principles of constitutional law. It does this because critical race theory proponents assume racism is present everywhere and always, and they look for it critically until they find it. And they always find it.
Dude, that's... You can't just say, like, there are
Oh my god.
such nuances to this, the way he's saying it. They look for it critically until they find... Okay, they don't look for it critically until they find it. Folks, that's what's called confirmation bias, right? And academic inquiry cannot work if you go into it with an idea already in your head, like Black people struggle. Like you could see that phenomenon, and then you can say, why do Black people struggle in this society, right? And you can ask, how do they struggle in this society? And you can ask, how do they respond to those adversities in this society? But you can't just look for evidence that Black people are struggling, because then you'll have a hammer and everything will look like a nail. So you'll see everything as struggle, right? Whereas that may not be accurate, even though that's a ridiculous example because that marginalization exists, right? So what this guy is saying is they'll find racism in everything as if there's some they, right, who's doing this, rather than just people. And the other possibility is you find racism in everything because racism tends to be in everything. Like we were looking on the other stream, we had, you know, the evidence-based statement of, you know, prisons are just legal slavery. We've made them into plantations. Then we have the net neutrality thing, which is not just to disenfranchise minority and low SES populations of color, but it's not just Black people, it's other populations of color too, but it is to do that with an intention of limiting access and freedom of expression to those populations. That's net neutrality. Then there's just city planning, and why in every city there's a across the tracks, across the bridge, across the whatever. It's always across something. Like, yeah, it is in fact there. And this is a way of explaining why it's there and how we can move past those ways of being, because we can have a sense, like everyone's so into that iceberg thing, right? Like, look at that's what critical race theory is. It's the social iceberg. You have to go real deep and see how, like, you may not have thought, you're like, wait, that's why prisons, I thought people just talk shit about prisons and end or abolish prison slavery, right? But no, it's there. You know, you think maybe just activists they're calling it prison slavery because they want prisons. No, prisons are work camps. They are production facilities. There are places where prisoners are still picking cotton and harvesting tobacco from the tobacco fields in North Carolina, and there are white prisoners doing that too. There are Mexican prisoners doing that too. There are Puerto Rican prisoners doing that too, but there are Black American prisoners doing that in the majority. So what you essentially just have is Black men sweating in fields because they're forced to. What does that sound like?
Yeah.
Does that somehow mean like they deserve it? I'm sure people said that about slaves that were taken off of, like, they're onboarded into ships off of coastal African nations. They deserved it too, because what? They were just savages, or they were different, or they're not entirely, remember, they're 3/5 of a human being. How does it feel like, where's the other 2/5 of your humanity? Oh.
I don't know.
3/5 of a human being. And I don't know what I am. I don't know what I am. The British could tell me what I am. Folks, by the way, like Nadine, there's like white American oppressors. I had my people had white British oppressors right up until it's the same time frame. Like India, if you didn't know, didn't gain its independence from the British protectorate until the late 40s. And the civil rights movement here in the States occurred in the late 60s. Didn't really change a lot for either population. I mean, those things still exist. And it's, as this guy's saying, racism still exists. And the leftovers of that original racism and racist thinking still exists. So let's just see. Let's see what else he says. Or what do you think? Have you had enough of James Lindsay so far?
I mean, what else we got?
Let's see what else we got. Let's see a little bit. The Trevor Noah and Roy Wood Jr. I love Roy Wood Jr. in these little things.
Yes.
Like, this will be a little bit of a palate cleanser. Let's see, because I like how they put stuff.
Let's do it.
Critical race theory. It's made conservatives so mad they've temporarily forgotten about Ilhan Omar. But watching people get all worked up about an obscure graduate level theory of the American legal system, one can't help but wonder, does literally anyone on the right actually know what critical race theory is? That's this week on Unsolved Mysteries, MAGA edition.
Fantastic.
In the 1970s, legal scholars began to examine the influence of institutional racism on the nation's laws. They called this movement critical race theory, or CRT. Who's down with CRT? Not the GOP. And yet, the more conservatives talk about CRT,
Down with
the more you start to
CRT,
wonder.
yeah, you know me.
Does anyone even Wikipedia this thing?
Critical race theory is a religion of secularism and guilt.
Critical race theory is
A religion of secularism and guilt.
You just made that shit up off the top of her head.
No, I mean, I know what it is. Like, basically, that's what it is, right? Conservatives, who are largely represented by a population of white Americans, are mad. I mean, they're literally saying, like, why can't you just leave racism in the past? We're in the modern times now. We're not doing that. Black people have all the access that they want. I mean, look at Will Smith, right? Like, it's that kind of, those kind of statements, right? Look at Serena Williams. Look at Jamie Foxx. Look at Barack Obama. He was the president. What more do you want? An accessible store with nutritional value food for my children.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's okay that Serena Williams is awesome, but my kids still are eating shit food from the corner store, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. And those reasons aren't I'm working as hard as, or I'm not working as hard as Serena Williams.
Right.
And not everybody can be fucking Serena Williams or
right,
Barack
that,
Obama.
Right.
Like,
right. And
is that the criteria for you? You have to be fucking Will Smith?
And not everyone's trying to go down, you know, those paths. Like, some of us are trying to forge our own, you know, way forward. And it's like, that's like, nope, go down a street that has already been paved. But
right. But
it's not, it's, no,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's not proving, going down a street that's already been paved is not really proving beneficial when, like, you know, I I can't get no service.
Right. So I think that's the idea. Like, things are fine. You see Black people doing cool stuff. You know, Jay-Z and Beyonce are billionaires. Look at, you know, a Black man like Kanye who came from so little and now he gets to date Kim Kardashian. You know, it's like, or that's already old news, right? So, but the idea is, that's being said in order to tell people, why can't you just let it go? Why do you have to keep, and the unspoken thing is, why do you keep bringing shit up to make us feel guilty about stuff we didn't even do?
I've had a friend to tell me that, like, you know, like, I feel like we should just, you know, everybody should just be able to, like, move forward, and like, and I was like, so she was like, everybody struggles, like, and it was just like such a disassociation. I was telling her about something that really painful that had happened to me, an experience where I felt, you know, like I was hurt, and like a lot of other Black women were hurt, and that was her response. And I just realized, like, oh, it's not like, it really hits home sometimes, and you wind up losing, you know, friendships when you, sometimes if you make the decision to like pull away from someone that is just like completely invalidating your experience and like not understanding, no desire to, like, everything's fine, let's just move on. But that's not the reality that I'm living.
Right. Let's go a little deeper into that, because that scenario, I know what you're talking about, and I know where that happened. And you know, we're always respectful of the privacy of people that we've worked with and dealt with, but the circumstances that exist in those spaces are worthy of critique, right?
Mhm.
And this particular space you're involved with is a program that is intended, I think if I describe it like this, it sounds awful, but it's a program by white people who have money and are part of a church that's predominantly white, who want to help the community. And by community, they mean people who are at risk and underrepresented and lack privilege, which in this community tend to be Black individuals. And so it's white people helping Black people and establishing white mentors for those Black people. So you have what they're called allies, right? Like you have a couple of allies, and presumably they're saying, because they're successful white people, and they're saying, unsuccessful, confused Black woman, let me help you to elevate to a place where you can live and perhaps taste some of what we have accomplished for ourselves, right? And as a function of that experience, which you are currently still engaged in, a little bit earlier on, because I remember you came to me with this, it happened that an exercise in a role-playing exercise in a physical space, or was it physical, or was it over Zoom that time?
It was over Zoom.
Okay, well, it was still a group space, and there was an exercise that was conducted, and it brought harm to the collective of Black women that were there as participants in this program. So Nadine, please talk about that. Like, how did that, like, what actually happened in that space?
So first off, it was like this little simulation that you had tickets, and you had to choose, be a Black person or a white person, and like you basically, as they read off different laws, that were written, like,
Why did you have to
depending.
pretend to be black or white? Like, there were already black people and white people in the space.
Yeah, there was only black people.
Right.
Except for there was one Hispanic person, but like, it was a horrible situation from the start, honestly. Like, who thought of this?
Yeah.
But
So
like,
what-
then as the laws were being read, depending on if you were a black person or a white person, you either lost a money ticket or a land ticket, or there were even missed opportunity tickets. A missed opportunity ticket? Like, oh my God.
So it was trying to show how policy may negatively impact black populations.
Yes,
Because
except
every time something read, it's kind of like that exercise where if this benefits you, take a step forward. If it harms you, take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
So surprise, surprise, all the black people had no tokens. So everything was taken away.
Yeah.
What was the harm that occurred?
Well, of course, every black woman on there was super depressed after that. And, even I like started getting, emotional and really pulled down when I just saw like everybody was just like, yeah, we're defeated. Like, this is exactly what it's like. Thanks for the reminder. We didn't need this. We live this in real life.
I know.
But it was
Thanks
just like
for the role play game that just reminded us of how shitty our actual lives are.
Yeah. And there were people that were like, I just went through something like this last Tuesday. And there was a person that was like, my family, my mother lost her land, and you know what I mean? Like, we worked our butts off to get it, and then they took it from us anyways. Like, so I didn't need this in the first place. And like, and there was no room, there was no room. The management of the facilitators of the program was just like, there was no skills on how to like hold everything. Nothing else mattered besides like what you just put somebody through, and like holding space for like, was there no plan in place beforehand before you traumatize everybody? And it was just like, let's hurry up, because we just wanted to like talk. That's how we started, at least let us just talk. Like, we're taking this thing over because you just completely, you know what I mean? Like, this is not, nobody wants to just be, now we get off of here and like go back to our lives after this. And it was all hushed and rushed, and no space for like us to even try to, get past or through this feeling of like just
process.
Yeah, nothing. Just let's hurry up and get through the rest of this.
Yeah, so it can be argued like that is, and let's just say it for what it is, folks. Like, that facilitator was and is a white woman who comes from a place that isn't the same as all the black women and the Hispanic woman come from in this particular group. And the lack of awareness, empathy, understanding, and planning to deal with that particular situation as it unfolded, which was essentially a re-traumatization of past traumas and more recent traumas for this group of women. And being unable to even see that could potentially occur when you're applying, like, folks, the facilitator who goes into a thing like this can't just be a random person. You have to be trained in multiple disciplines to a certain extent. You don't have to be an expertise in all of those, but developmental disciplines, mental health disciplines, social emotional learning, all of this kind of stuff, to go into that space, to be able to work with people and not hurt them. And if that consideration is bullshit to people, then I don't know what to say, because just that consideration, to have an awareness of how everything is going to affect this group of people who have been marginalized in a particular way, that's critical race theory. That's a lens of critical race theory right there. It doesn't seem like bullshit to me. I think that woman whom we know, who facilitates that particular group, like, bro, you're doing that. You're choosing to facilitate a group like that. That's awesome. It's awesome that this program exists, but fucking learn what you need to learn, because you're doing a shit job. Like, you know, and it's not okay. It's not okay. So anyway, let's just...
The denial of critical thinking.
Critical race theory is a device designed to capture white guilt.
It is about working to change and overthrow infrastructure.
An ideology that threatens to overturn the advances of human civilization over the last 500 years.
Ask conservatives what CRT...
You notice they find like, oh, hey, we found 3 people of color who will nod their heads to everything that we say.
Right.
Folks, you can't just put black people on TV and say, see, black people agree with this too, and not realize how fucking racist that is.
Right.
Holy shit. They're finding racism in everything, like your news report.
It's not difficult, sorry.
I mean, like Trump's famous, like, have you ever heard this thing from Trump? Oh yeah, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. Ready for this?
Oh my God.
We had a case where we had an African-American guy who was a fan of mine. Great fan, great guy. In fact, I want to find out what's going on with him. You know what look at my African-American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so we have an African-American guy at one of the rallies a month ago, and he's sitting there behaving. And we had protests.
He's sitting there behaving.
Inside the arena. And they were dressed in a Ku Klux Klan outfit, okay? And they're running around dressed as Ku Klux Klan. And the place is booing them, booing. This African-American gets up and, man, he slugged these guys. He slugged them. And by that time, their hat was off because it got ripped off as they were running up the stairs. But this guy, a great guy, I think he was a military guy for a long time, he slugged this guy wearing the Ku Klux Klan outfit. But by the time he got up to the top, you couldn't see it was a Ku Klux Klan outfit. So when the African-American cold-cocked this guy never knew what happened. Everybody thought the African-American was against me, and it was the opposite. He was like this great guy, military guy. We have tremendous African-American support. The reason is I'm going to bring...
And this is why racism no longer exists. See, that's what people fail to see, like that attitude. This is the president of the United States, and we're still talking about, look, there's my African-American right here. And this
look at my African-American. Isn't he beautiful? I mean, is he for sale? Like...
Yeah. That's pretty bad.
And they'll say it's a theory, a religion, a device, and an ideology. This thing's got more unnecessary features jammed into it than Microsoft Word. But while conservatives may not know exactly what CRT is, they definitely know what it does.
Critical race theory is basically teaching people to hate our country, hate each other.
Critical race theory is supporting all these anti-Christ indoctrinations of our children.
Critical race theory. Yeah. What does that do to a black boy,
black and white kid,
whose mother is white and whose mother is black and whose father is white? Right. Does it reinforce the Oedipal notion all kids have, wanting to kill their father and marry their mother? I mean, what does this do to the children?
Bro, what is your problem, Bill? That guy is sick.
Oh my God, we went to
that. Now I know
deep,
why he didn't
like
go with a
Freudian
black
psychology. Like, oh
father
my
and a white
God,
mother.
wow.
Look, bro.
You think your son wants to kill his father and marry you? Is that what's happening?
Oh my goodness. No, that's not what's happening.
Is that dude trying to smash his mama?
That's what I'm saying.
We're not getting any
Roy.
closer to solving this mystery. Basically, the only thing we know about critical race theory is that it has something to do with race. Or does it?
It's not even about race. It's about destroying the existing society, using race, using gender, using the climate, using immigration.
Critical race theory isn't even about race? Is it a theory? Is it critical? Is it real at all? Is it possible critical race theory is a mass hallucination we're all having, the result of 15 months spent locked in our apartments and spraying Windex on all of our groceries?
All right. So, well done, Roy.
Yeah.
That went a little crazy. So let's take a look at something a little bit. Bring it over like this. So I'm trying to look at. So this is Gloria Ladson Billings. Is this her too? Yeah. Well, they're citing. So we got an overview. Okay, so let's apply this. This is my field, right? So like I came up in, this is where I did my doctoral work in the space of education, cognition and learning, learner development, stuff like that. So in terms of addressing learners, right? Like we definitely had to have a sense of what are the barriers for learners. Your kids, my kids, other kids, right? So this is where we get into this space of seeing how CRT can work in a school space, in an education space. So let's take a look and see, right, what they have to say here. CRT's framework is comprised of the following 5 tenets: counter storytelling, the permanence of racism, whiteness as property, interest conversion, and the critique of liberalism, right? So that sounds awesome, and yet also doesn't make sense to like most people. So let's see what they have to say about that. The use of counter stories in analyzing higher education's climate provides faculty, staff, and students of color a voice to tell their narratives involving marginalized experiences, rather than Nadine, don't bring that up. We're not talking about racism here. We live in a world where a young Black girl like you can work at a bank if you wanted to. You could be the manager of a grocery store. Like, all of it's there for you. Why are you bringing any of this stuff up? Rather than students of color a voice to tell their narratives involving marginalized experiences, which is difficult for white people, because what that means for not only other white students, but white faculty and teachers is shut the fuck up and listen. That's a difficult, right? So counter stories can assist in analyzing the climate of a college campus and provide opportunities for further research in the ways which an institution can become inclusive and not simply superficially diverse. Because you can throw all sorts of people of color all over a campus. Doesn't mean that it's all, together.
It's all good,
all good. So the permanence of racism suggests that racism controls the political, social, and economic realms of U.S. society. And there's lots of people that we just watch, including the governor of our state, who says that's bullshit. And
well, he's the governor, of course.
Right. So, but they also put black men on there. There were black dudes who were nodding their head and saying, this is not true.
So, okay, so then I'll shake my head this way, and then that'll validate us, right?
Well, they had 4 black dudes.
Okay, well, we can find a couple more people. Like, I don't think it's just a shake head thing. Like,
What
that's
if
not
you
gonna
just
make us
open
go away.
your window and yell outside, say, hey, everybody, do you think racism controls political, social, and economic realms in our society?
Oh, everyone's gonna nod.
Yeah. In CRT, racism is seen as an inherent part of American civilization because it is and has been from the beginning. Our founding fathers owned slaves. Slaves, black slaves, brown slaves, to be super racist about Eastern Asian populations, yellow slaves. The red people.
Red slaves.
They weren't even slaves.
No,
they just killed those motherfuckers. They're like, you're not even going to be able to help us. We're just going to kill you. Or put you in special places that are reserved for you to stay in, called reservations. But if you come off those reservations, you're fucking dead. This is what we've done. But racism hasn't been a part of our American society. It's literally been that from the beginning. White individuals are privileged over people of color in most areas of life, including education. Right? The third tenet of CRT is whiteness as property. Due to the embedded racism in American society, whiteness can be considered a property interest. As a result, this notion operates on different levels. These include the right of possession, the right to use and enjoyment, the right to disposition, and the right to exclusion. So, you don't get to live in town of Tioga. If you had $500,000 to spend on a home and a car, because no buses go out there, or maybe a bus or two, but I'm not even sure of that. And you could afford the property taxes out there. This is a very affluent part of Gainesville, folks. You had the money, you had everything, right? All of it. Do you think you would easily be able to go and become a community member of Town of Tioga? What would get in the way of that?
Don't I have to buy property from somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, at some point, they're gonna look.
Like, you can have a suitcase full of money, but it would still be hard to buy that.
That probably would make the suspicions rise if I had a suitcase full of money.
The right to use and enjoyment of different spaces, right? There are parks for people of color in Gainesville. Oh, Siraj, what are you talking about? Parks aren't segregated like that. Okay.
Neighborhoods are.
And there are parks in and around those neighborhoods where people look sideways at you if you just have your children of color running around and going crazy. The right to disposition. Have you ever been in a place where your children of color running around are, can somebody control those children? But if white children are running around and having a great time, they're like, look how sweet they're being. They're just being kids. Have you had that experience?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah?
Just a little bit, though, not a lot, right?
No, a lot.
So you're starting to see how whiteness, I mean, they're calling it property. I think of it more as commodity. It's a commodified value. Like you're white, just being white gets you a lot of value. And being black or being brown is far less value. So this is where we've come to through today. Obviously, critical race theory is a very deep dive to the extent that, I mean, it's like a bottomless well at this point. We don't know what the bottom of it is. You know, we don't know how far it goes. And people, it's complicated because people choose to twist what it actually is and what it's actually intended for in so many ways. We're not here to do a graduate level course on CRT. We're here to just show that the claims that CRT is making as a theoretical framework are real. They're real on an individual level, but they're real on community levels and even on macro social levels. You know, how can you say that, you know, systematic racism does not exist when racism has been part of every institutional system? It's been part of the development and prospering of every institutional system we have in place. The economic systems of this country, people made lots of money on the backs, not only of people of color, but people of low socioeconomic status. And I would say that the racism isn't just about color. The racism in this country goes hand in hand with classism. So there's been poor white folk who were like Irish people, Italian immigrants, Polish immigrants. There's segregation and marginalization of Jews, Jewish Americans, that happens through today. And it doesn't matter how much money you have. You can have lots of money if you're Jewish and lots of power, and you're still anti-Semitism exists. And it's usually white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. It's like the whitest of white. It's the delineation of like white Europeans that are constantly in a space of, oh, are you tired of marginalizing black people? Let's be anti-Semitic against Jews now. That's what white nationalism is. It's not just about black people and brown people and Mexicans and immigrants. It's about Jews. It's about many different types of marginalization. It's like a golden corral buffet of marginalization. Take your pick. What are you feeling today? So what do you think, Nadine? I mean, I think we got pretty deep today, but like, you think we should revisit this a little bit more?
We definitely have to. We got to get in a little bit deeper. Definitely.
Yeah. All
I'm
right.
ready.
So that's been Cluster B, Nightmare Fuel for today, but we haven't even gotten into why. We haven't even gotten into the Cluster B aspect of this. And that'll be a little hint for the next thing, which is, you know, this is ultimately about identitarian politics, and we'll get into that. Yeah. We'll see you folks back here again. And yeah. I'm Dr. Sraj. This is Nadine.
What?
I know, that's what I said.
No, this is Nadine Pueros. Thank you.
This is Nadine Pueros. Well, that's another thing. That's what a lot of people, that even goes to the idea of, like, you know, choosing one's identity and being able to express one's identity in this world, whereas people don't do that. Everywhere, I know that gets to you, because everywhere you go, we're like, Nadine.
I know.
Nadine.
And
like,
no matter how many times I say it's Nadine, and they'll like, there are some places where they're like, repeat your first and last name, and I'm like, Nadine, and they're like, okay, Nadine. So
So
Meanwhile, there'll be Nadia next to me, and they're like, Nadia.
I know.
Oh, Sandra. Nadine.
They won't even. Yeah, they'll do Sandra. They won't even do Sandra. Like there's just. But Nadine. Yeah, there's a lot there. So anyway, yeah, back next time.
All right.
All right.
They'll never know.